Good afternoon. I'm Ariana Orn, Director of Communications and Public Affairs here at the Special Competitive Studies Project. Yesterday, we launched a new special series here on LinkedIn, a live week-long series called Lunch and Learn, exploring the implications of generative AI on national security. If you happen to miss yesterday's event, after this one, scroll down and you can learn a little bit more about innovation. But for today, I have the privilege of joining my colleagues Liza Tobin and David Chi from SCSP's Economy panel for a discussion on the economy team's report, Building the Generative Economy. To start today's panel, I'd like to just do a brief get to know you for our followers. So Liza, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Ariana. It's great to be here on LinkedIn Live. So I joined SCSP 2 years ago. I spent most of my career in the federal government, basically at the nexus between China, economics, and national security. So I spent some time working and living in China before grad school. And then after graduate school, I joined the federal government, first in the IC, then some time in DOD. And my most recent position was at the National Security Council as China director under the current and former administrations. And then when I was ready to transition out of government, the timing was really fortuitous because Eric and Illy were launching this project and the mission was perfectly aligned with the issues I had been working on in government. So I joined SCSP at that point.
And David?
Yes, hi. Great to be here. I also came from U.S. government. I'm more on the technology side, so I have an engineering background, and I've parlayed that through various roles as a program manager and a technologist, mostly focusing on RF and communications. So I am here with SCSP just about 4 months on a fellowship, so there's a little collaboration, and I'm excited to join Liza's team.
Great. So yesterday, David Lin did a pretty wide overarching view of our entire report. So if you missed yesterday's, please go back and check that out. He goes over the full fall report called Generative AI, the Future of Innovation Power. But Liza, if you could start with just sort of the whole scope of what your team's memo, Building the Generative Economy, looks like.
Sure. So we're the economy panel. We're really asking questions about economic competitiveness and national security. So just to kind of set the scene as we approach this issue, a number of us are coming out of government and national security. And so that's a perspective that we're bringing. And the last number of years, maybe 7 or 8 years, our experience in government watching China was really one of a paradigm shift. So going back to maybe 2014, 2015, 2016, the reigning paradigm on China was, China can't innovate. They just can copy and steal technology, and the innovation happens in the US. And of course, as all our listeners know, that paradigm has been completely blasted to smithereens. And the reigning paradigm is now that China is actually getting ahead. They're catching up with and surpassing the US in certain key technologies. I think the most well-known ones are 5G network hardware with Huawei, hypersonic missiles, EV batteries, drones, and a number of others. And so I think at SCSP, when we started to see the generative AI revolution really break out with ChatGPT and all the rest last November, I, for one, got really excited because I think it was a reminder that innovation is still happening in the US, that we still have a chance, that we are currently leading in this race, in this key general purpose technology. But I think the lessons of the last 6 or 7 years with these unwelcome tech surprises where kind of China broke out and got ahead, remind us that we can't be complacent. We really have to double down on our leadership. And so our report really sought to get back to the basics and say, what are the basic building blocks of AI leadership and how do we invest in those building blocks to make sure the US can lengthen that lead? So the 3 building blocks that we identified are compute, data, and people. And that's what I think we can talk about a little bit more today.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. Maybe one area for us to start, and David, I'll send this question to you, is the impact that generative AI has on the economy itself, and maybe how that's different than the introduction of other technologies.
Sure. Well, as Liza mentioned, we see generative AI as a general purpose technology akin to the steam engine, electricity, the internet. So really broad-based technology that has wide-ranging impact across many facets of the economy. That's what we kind of expect going forward, that this is going to have a major impact across a lot of the creative space that we've already seen, and then R&D and just all kinds of industries that we're just at the beginning. So, and yeah, I mean, as you think of language, you mentioned ChatGPT, but music, images, everything that's being digitized, all of that can interact with generative AI and be enhanced and just multiplied. So that's where we're really going to see some advances.
Nice. Liza, the nations that are leading in generative AI, it seems, will reap the benefits of productivity and economic growth. How do we ensure that there's the talent that can provide for these breakthroughs?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ariana. The talent issue, really, one thing I've been convicted of in my time at SCSB is talent is the key variable in this technology competition. When we go out and talk to technology companies and ask them, what are your obstacles to scale? What are your obstacles to doing what you want to do? The most common thing they mention is talent, the people, the workforce, finding skilled workers that understand AI, that understand technology. That is potentially a choke point. So, it's often been said that innovation policy is immigration policy, and I think that's true. One interesting stat that we came across when we were writing our report is that 65% of America's leading AI firms have founders or co-founders who are immigrants. So really, this generative AI breakthrough is because of immigrants in our system who came to the US, found opportunity, and then innovated, invented great things, and helped diffuse it across the economy. So we are not doing enough as a nation to attract talent, to retain it once it's here, and then also to develop homegrown talent. So a few of the steps we talk about to address this in our report are, there's really three things, and we have to do all of them. It's not enough to do just one. So immigration, this is really key. We've got to fix the H-1B visa system. And as others have said, staple a green card to STEM graduates, allow them to stay in the US. Too often, these talented individuals have to go back to their home countries, even though they want to stay in the US, because they can't, they're not allowed to stay here long term. STEM education, of course, it's not enough to just be attracting global talent. We need to invest in the next generation. Generative AI actually creates a lot of opportunities here. We're still at the beginning of this, but we see the potential for both students and teachers to benefit. So all this potential for students to have really tailored personal tutors that can help them. And then for teachers, hopefully to lessen some of the administrative and kind of paperwork burdens that they have to deal with, so they can focus more of their time on the actual students, the human interactions. And then lastly, of course, workforce. We need to have programs in place to train workers and help them transition to a tech-driven future.
Yeah. So as Liza mentioned in her summary, there's these three components that you guys have mentioned: the data, the compute, and the people. And that's, a really great way of explaining the people section. Could you explain the importance of the compute section of the report to our followers?
Sure. So for AI, generative AI, compute, we're talking about data center scale compute, really. This is thousands of GPUs over months of time training a model on data. So luckily, a lot of our big tech firms specialize in cloud and data centers, thinking of AWS, Google, Azure. So we have that scale, and we actually have pretty good global coverage. About, I think, 65% of the global market are US big tech companies. Additionally, the chips and the GPUs that are going into these data centers, most are designed by US firms as well: NVIDIA, AMD, Intel. So we have a lot of big tech resources, big tech companies in the industry that are leading the way, and that is great for our country. But I think one of the recommendations we make is we need a national AI research resource, someone to bring together some of the science and the funding and the academics, so they also have access and ability to access the compute. Because if it's just the big tech companies, we're going to lose some of the coordination between industry and the public and private sector, really, and academia. So that's one key recommendation that we see in the needs for compute going forward with Gen AI.
And just a follow up to maybe build on some of what you just said, why is it that the United States has a lead over the PRC in this compute area?
I guess with the really it's the chip design. So we have leading edge capabilities. It's a global infrastructure and it's really complicated, the supply chain. And we actually have a microelectronics paper coming out, dropping shortly. So it's in the final stages. So we'll go really in depth on that. But that's really the key piece of this.
Yeah. Sort of maybe to go back to some of the workforce comments that you made when we were talking about the people section, I think something that's on a lot of people's minds is what's going to happen to the workforce, what's going to happen to labor as Gen AI enters the economy. So maybe what does your team, what are we looking at? What's the research here?
Yeah, this is really a hot topic. I think there's a lot of fear out there that robots are going to be taking our jobs, that AI in general and generative AI in particular is just going to displace tons and tons of workers. So it's really early days, and we're really only at the beginning of this AI revolution. So it's too soon to tell. But I think the one thing we can do is look back at history and see what happened with previous technological revolutions. And I think that can help us have maybe a more balanced and nuanced view of what might happen this time, and then how we can prepare as a society. So if you look back at previous episodes of automation, where you had automation and other technological change, where you had things like digital technologies, the computer, the internet, or going back further, electricity, the steam engine, the internal combustion engine. First of all, it took a number of years, even decades, for this to kind of fully move into society. And these did have tremendously profound impacts on how humans worked. But overall, it was associated with an increase in total jobs. So it changed the way people worked. And in some cases, it displaced, it put machines in the place of humans for certain jobs or certain tasks. But over time, there were more jobs as a result. And what do I mean by this? So I'll give just a couple examples. I think the automobile. So of course, when the automobile was introduced over time, it displaced human workers, stable hands, grooms, people making horseshoes, things like that. There are very few people working in those industries today, but at the same time, there were people building highways. There was the motel being set up on the side of these highways, restaurants kind of popping up as Americans started taking to the road and spending more money on all of those goods and services, as well as mechanics and things like that. And so over time, the number of jobs that was created, new jobs that we couldn't even imagine before, came onto the scene. So there was this gradual kind of change in the way we worked, but more jobs created. Another interesting example is the ATM. As the ATM was kind of integrated into the banking system, it changed the way bank tellers work. But there were actually more people working as bank tellers after the introduction of ATMs than before, which is really kind of counterintuitive. So I think the bottom line is there will be a lot of change. Workers need to learn how to use this technology and make them more productive. And as a society and as governments, we need to make sure that they have resources, training, and things like that in place so that they can make this transition in a human-friendly way.
So we've covered people, we've covered compute. That leaves one left. I've heard data described as the crown jewel, the bread and butter, and also the progress against some of the world's largest problems. I've heard this probably at a handful of events just in the last month, and it continues to come up. So how can the United States maintain this competitive edge in generative AI by leveraging data?
Well, I think we're fortunate that the internet is but has massive troves of English language text. So obviously, generative AI has used that in the images there as well. And we also have big tech platforms that are innovating in this space and have their own data through the natural global reach of their platforms. So we have those advantages. I think some of our data privacy laws have not been uniformly applied at the federal level. So that is one area that we touch on. And it's really a way, an area that globally we've forked. The EU is more of a regulation first approach to data privacy, so they're marching forward with that, and you see some of their progress. China, on the other hand, generally firewalls their data and maintains it within their country, does not allow outside access. But at the same time, they leverage some of the global reach of their big tech companies and have access to that data through their companies. So it's a difficult environment. I think data privacy legislation is one of the key areas that we can make some advances on and that we recommend. And we need to treat data as kind of a resource that can be traded. So digital trade of data with our allies and friends in a marketplace, that's probably the next step, or a space that can be explored. And then IP data rights, we haven't really focused on that as a government, just kind of the regulation side of the IP space and what that means. So we need to hone in on that.
So just my last question, and maybe to leave our audience with something that they walk away with. Sometimes, and SCSP has a pretty wide reach of followers who may not fully understand the national security implications of generative AI, or vice versa, are national security focused or technology focused. As with that in mind, what is maybe the one tidbit of information that you would want to leave with someone who might say, why should this matter to me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, just in our econ report, we cover a wide range from immigration to cloud computing. So obviously, we see a lot of impact, and I think we're just at the beginning, really, of this massive arc. Like I said, it's a general purpose technology, and we're at the beginning. So where it goes, it's going to be exciting to see. As a technologist and a Slate nerd, I'm excited because some of the implications with robotics and the cognitive space, I see some of the fantasy, drawn out in Star Trek, like Data, the android Data, ironically named, that I could almost, with a few more advances, I could almost see that actually coming to fruition in my lifetime. So that is amazing, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
So going back to something you mentioned earlier, productivity. So I'm an economic nerd, and productivity is a word economists use to basically mean how much economic value each worker can produce in a set amount of time. And so I'm really excited that generative AI could be the key to unlock massive productivity growth in the US and around the world. In the last 10 or 20 years, the US and other advanced economies have been in what economists describe as a productivity trap, where productivity just isn't growing as fast as it used to. And they discuss why, and there's a lot of debates, and economists never agree on anything. But what's exciting is that generative AI, if we adopt it and diffuse it widely, and we help workers use it in a way that works for society and works for our democracy, it could really allow us to produce a whole lot more economic value, doing more with less, producing more creative content, producing more solution, discovering new drugs, discovering new materials that could help us, reduce our dependence on rare earths. The sky is really the limit. And so I think, this is really the key or the foundation to doing everything else that we need to do as a nation. All of the other things SCSP is and the trade-offs and dilemmas that policymakers face of how do we increase defense budgets while at the same time building the social safety net? How do we spend more money here without cutting it there? How do we invest more in R&D? It all comes down to, can we boost the productivity of our economy, create more value, and then do more of these strategic things. So I'm really excited that it could unlock a lot of those benefits.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of our followers for joining us for day 2 of generative AI. Lunch and Learn. We have a lot of very long acronyms and words sometimes here at SCSP, but everything connects. Lunch and Learn, exploring the implications of generative AI on national security. Tomorrow we'll be joined by some members of our foreign policy team, and we're looking forward to an equally as exciting conversation tomorrow. We hope you'll join us at 12 p.m. Eastern Time.